Welcome to YouTube Masterclass. This is Dr. Aaron Sheley, and I'm here to teach STEM from film criticism over to film special effects. 409, you can sign up for at Coursera, through Harvard, USC, or Calarts, which I'm professor at all three, but remotely through this YouTube Masterclass show. I've been talking about it's more of a class than a show, but I call it that too because it's on regularly about 3 to 4 days while it's on. And we have 3 classes left. This is the 3-2-1. The final one I will still lecture, but then I'll give out the final and you can turn it into Coursera. But being that the final is less than 2 weeks away and the next semester doesn't start till even right before the end of that next month. And I don't want to scare you that I'll be gone too long. I know without me, you'll all get very scared about the situation of film theory that we've come to and how the procedure is getting maxed out. But we have special effects. And so I'm going to go on with it. I'm going to say I've got 3 sci-fi films here that I'm going to talk about. And they are all special effects written. The first one is kind of a lower budget movie, but the special effects are so beautiful that we all consider in camera and added on later special effects as this film is more prominatory, and it's Alphaville. And we're going to discuss that first, but then we have Blade Runner and Ready Player One. And I think you understand what we're going for about this post-apocalyptic dystopia universe that comes from like a Philip K. Dick novel into the sci-fi genre that we're looking into tonight. And then Alphaville is Jean-Luc Godard in the 60s in the middle of his French New Wave series that ends with Weekend and starts with Breathless, and in the middle is Alphaville, and it's Eddie Constantine is a B actor from Hollywood that decides to play Lemmy Caution in this movie, and most of the actors are no names. There's a computer that talks the whole movie, and the computer that talks the whole movie sometimes puts up title cards like E equals MC squared, and I'm thinking, I remember watching that with a friend one time, and they're like, oh, this is seditious, or it's like subversive because they're showing like the atom bomb and how to make it. And I'm like, I don't really think anyone can make an atom bomb out of me saying E equals MC squared. But if I ever get a masterclass and say E equals MC squared, will a bunch of people know how to devise atom bombs after that? I'm not sure. I'm willing to take that risk because we're not being banned for that, because I haven't ever looked into actually nuclear physics myself, and I'm not even sure if that's a nuclear physics code. But here's the thing about Alphaville that gives other web codes away that are far more dangerous, and some of them are even Marxistic. And I would say like the intertitles in a Godard film are constantly like struggling between communistic and some form of like maybe bipartisan with Republic kind of right wing, because he's kind of this anarchist. He's like, I'll send the dudes to school and they'll kill somebody, maybe even a teacher, and that'll just prove the point, like in Shenhua. And it doesn't even prove a point. The whole point is that everything's pointless, and if you're not getting pointless out from Breathless, you're going to get pointless out from Alphaville, because he goes into a hotel room, gets attacked, kills the person, they all wake up the next day, they're fine, and they go about their business, but it was somebody else anyway that woke up. And it's like this hotel that's transferring around in like this hall of like other rooms next to it, and in the movie where he's going to hotels, and then there's all these Hiroshima more like flashbacks to these like cameras going by and these like lights, and they're all flying past in these drives, and then the computer's like E equals MC squared. It'd be funnier if he's saying it like in 2001 when he's like Daisy, the whole thing with HAL 9000. And I'm not going to deny 2001 doesn't belong in this stack of the best sci-fi films ever. We've a little bit gone through 2001: A Space Odyssey, and that was actually a couple of years after Alphaville. And what I like about Alphaville, one thing that's cool about it, is the cars that drive around in it are actually like the spaceships. And some of the humans are aliens, and it has this unforgettable scene where there's this room with a pool, and all these people are jumping in and getting assassinated while they jump in. I mean, it's like a death penalty room. And Eddie Constantine's kind of wandering through. He wanders through some pretty strange stuff in Alphaville. It's either him almost getting killed at his apartment, or like finding the bad guy, or like, it's got this whole Naked Lunch quality to it. Naked Lunch is another one that came out later in the 90s by David Cronenberg. But Alphaville's very calculated, and it's stylistic, and it has the chapter value. The chapter will say what the chapter is like. Lemmy Caution goes to Alphaville, it'll say, and then like next thing you know, it has the cars going by and the shadows cover the light of the lamps. I mean, we've covered a lot of ground on this, but let's get real. I mean, the point is that the sci-fi genre in the modern era is really coming about because of Alphaville. Like in the modern era, you have like less of the big set technology, more of even what you see in Dark Star, which is later too. But in Alphaville and Dark Star, it's kind of this low tech sensibility. In Blade Runner, it's very high tech, but it kind of pretends to be low tech in certain spots, like the robots being played by humans. But that actually makes for a very judicious mix of how it really would be in the future, as they would look that way. And Alphaville is a sci-fi movie that's kind of colluding with the modern world, saying, what if the modern world was already in a time warp, or if this really was what they were like in the future, and it's just not that we're flying around with jetpacks, like in Fahrenheit 451, or we've got the elevator that flies everywhere in Blade Runner, with the camera moving to tilts in. And it's documentary style with Godard and Alphaville. He's got the camera out here, he's going around. He's like finding the character again, through a crowd as he walks through them. We've got all the new wave, and it's got the whole new wave apparatus, but no new waver had really thought of really making a sci-fi film. Although Hiroshima Mon Amour and some Verlaine Rie has this whole sci-fi quality to it that I can't quite explain. It's like this sense of mystery and desire and level of like romance and poetry that's good with it all. But the depoetic kind of deconstruction is Godard. He kind of breaks the cinema down to its single mode of quality, and it's kind of this extended version of what's primeval about primitive cinema, and then he takes it and he pushes it back in, and then you have the movie, and it's not that it's squeezed together, it's that everything is painted in a frame as it's moving in what we call this thing called movies. And then if we didn't have the movies, then nothing would move, it would just be still. And Alphaville is credence to this movie idea of moving. The cars are moving. Lemmy Caution's always on the run. The camera's always bebopping. Everything is moving. Like the pool, they're jumping in, they're dying. Everything is constantly moving. There's a couple of takes where everything's at a standstill, like Godard does in Pierre Le Fou, where they're dying down at the beach. They're not dying down at the beach. They're making love down at the beach. Pierre Le Fou, and his they die later on a cliffside or whatever. Not to spoil it, but he's with his girlfriend Anna Karina, John Paul Belmondo, and they're like, "Let's do it," and everything. He's like, "Look, it's the moon," and this is kind of a still spot for Godard, but even the dialogue's moving. And she's like, "Look, it's the moon." And he's like, "What is it?" And he's like, "Do you want to know what it's saying?" And she's like, "Yeah, what is the moon saying?" And he's saying, the moon is saying that an American and a Russian landed there at the same time. And the American said to the moon people, "Would you like to buy a Coca-Cola?" And the Russian people said, "Can we present to you Marxism?" No shit, that's a real line from a movie. I'm not kidding. And then so they're all kind of laughing and they do it and whatever. But that's the reason I bring that up is because that's like the Godard moment of Zen. Even in Weekend, when he's evolving around the neighborhood with the cameras, all these different angles and these boxy structures, we're starting to realize his signifiable narration, which there is, of course, the computer narrating this film, in case we don't think it has a narrator. And it's hard to keep track of, Band of Outsiders as a narrator, but I'm pretty sure it's got two, but maybe not. Sometimes he's just filming people talking and then showing a picture of something else, which is the basic building block of modern cinema. And at aspect ratio, this is a widescreen movie. It's funny, I want to read you something about Alphaville, and then we'll actually scurry on to the next film, because I don't know how long it's going to take to explain the breadth out of what I'm going to have to go through by the end of this. But the purpose of the sci-fi genre that's completely deconstructed here, and then I'll read the back in a minute, was perfectly deconstructed as the classical sci-fi, like you take Forbidden Planet, for instance. Now, Forbidden Planet has the flying saucers at the beginning, and then they're kind of at this ship where they're looking out the window, and it's like the Millennium Falcon, they're flying around, and the Millennium Falcon's kind of modern and classic, but in the classic, when they find the planet, there's a conflict on the planet, they have to resolve the conflict. It's like very Star Trek. And again, because we didn't get fully into Star Trek on TV, I think it's important to realize that a movie like Alphaville is kind of like bonus for a TV series later, because you think it is kind of the definition. We have less money to spend for something that just as many people are going to see for a price that's negligible, sometimes higher, sometimes lower than the usual screen time. And at Godard's money considerations are more like, can I shoot a lot of films in the next few years? And from 1959 with Breathless, and this is 1965 with Alphaville. I mean, 35 years after Metropolis. And Metropolis, we dazzle like we did with Salman Rushdie at the Telluride Film Festival at that movie. And Alphaville and Metropolis and Solaris. I can't not mention Solaris, I can't really hold up the Solaris cover or anything. But I know the Americans are against the Russians right now, and I pray one day we won't be again, but right now we are. But I'm not going to bang out anything rosy that Russian cinema doesn't matter, because I've got a lot of Russian film, and I'm about willing to tell you why it's still valuable. And at that time, the Ukraine was part of Russia, so let me tell you, this better not have to do anything to do with politics. Because if I have to take out my copy of Solaris, which I'm about to do, but fortunately some anti-Russian hit it, I'm okay with that. If they want to hide my pent-up aggression to why I still love war and peace and crime and punishment, we'll have words later about how just because we're at war with Britain doesn't mean we ban our Shakespeare. I mean, did we not have talks about this in the school? Okay, so anyways, I'm not going to ban anything Russian, and they're going, well, are they going to let you do this? I'm like, yeah, probably, because I haven't condemned anyone. Although I am against the fact that Russia has a war against Ukraine, very against it. I'm not against that. But if that has anything to do with why Solaris is a good or bad film, not necessarily, very less that it's a rare film. But the point of modern sci-fi is that it's this big breadth of cinema, or in Alphaville, this kind of like no exits version. And you see that in the no exits version, you're kind of getting this model of cinema that is acquired. Sorry, class, I'm having a technical difficulty there. That's going to be acquired as a problem with the classic agenda of the unquestionable world of sci-fi. Because really, you look at a film like Wizard of Oz, and Wizard of Oz is a great film, but it's kind of sci-fi because she flies her house to the middle of Oz and lands it. And so there's this kind of problem that has to be mythologically detected and defeated. It's like you mythologically detect the fact that the world is out of the ordinary and is kind of fantastic. And then you meet people along the way, tests, allies, and triggers. And then next thing you know, you hit a threshold guardian, and you either have to defeat it, have to retreat from it, or have to find some way around it, because the threshold guardian's not going to let you proceed unless you beat it. And the climax, the actual climax of the movie, is when the threshold guardian sees it. So now, this is why I set this up for so long, because these sci-fi movies are still full of special effects, that it goes against the grain of all these big sci-fi movies from the past. And even the B ones is kind of even lower than a B in Alphaville, because it's like saying, we make special effects out of the very jump cuts that we said originally were special effects, and now they're called jump cuts, editing move, and now we're taking those and making them special effects again. And now that we've made jump cuts special effects again, now there are only special effects in a sci-fi film, because it's going from one generation to the next in the same frame, and it's like the guy pops somewhere else in the frame and pops back. And you're thinking, in a sci-fi world, that all makes sense. And I just want to say that special effects in this, again, you have the gun banger thing, and we're not going to go through the safety or unsafety of having a gun on the set. I know you'd all love to learn it. We're not here to teach gun safety. We will say, usually 99 to 100% of the time in world cinema, when there's a gun on the set, and I'm talking about the whole world believes this, it's a fake gun. Unless there's no bullets in it, and I can solve the whole gun problem for you right now. Just don't put bullets in it. If you have to make it with a computer, whatever. And this isn't really with a computer, but it's about computers in the 60s. I thought computers came out in the 70s or 80s. This is outrageous. And the fact that they even have a computer in this is so controversial, because, again, isn't it true that computers and commercials about computers didn't come out until the late 70s, early 80s. So now we're sitting there going, was this prophetic? That the government had a computer and Godard was so anarchistic he'd found out about the government of France having a computer at this time. Every critic's overlooked. Every critic but me has overlooked the computers didn't exist in the 60s when Alphaville starring the computer wheels narrating the story. So now we have a breakthrough of special effects because he has this kind of neon light on the wall, like up there to E equals MC squared or whatever. It's on the other side. And you're like, well, if it says E equals MC squared, then how are you going to go on here and just say, okay, dude, these guys got a computer, how'd they get one? You know? It's like, so you got to think that somewhere in the strategy of building a computer, the video chess and video poker games that started video games in general, and this would make a great video game, just like an existential conquest, like Grand Theft Auto, but now you're like going after the mainframe of the computer. You know, it's post-apocalyptic at least, and dystopia. That it's dystopia out the whack isn't even half the problem. That it's low budget, that let me tell you, Eddie Constantine, as Lemmy Caution, is kind of like gravelly, and but he has subtitles. Normally I don't follow on those as a crutch, but sorry, I gotta read the subtitles of Eddie Constantine, and I'm not saying that he isn't speaking English too, because they might dub it over, and I don't really care. I think Godar's a master. His special effects are very jump cutty, like he'll have someone shoot a gun, and then he'll shoot the line of match from the gun to the person or from the side of the person that's getting hit. It's almost like this John Woo type gun battle thing where you shoot the gun from one angle and then the other guy's from the other angle, boom, getting hit. And then it kind of like makes it so that the bullet flies through the air and hits him, but it's a shot from over here, the guy getting hit, the shot over here from a guy shooting. I mean, it's a very effective method of making it look like it's happening. And these are typical, hopefully more cost-effective special effects. And cost-effective is kind of a bad word because everybody wants to be effective. And they just mean cost-effective as in like, give us the lowest common denominator, the lowest budget necessary to get this done, because we like to challenge ourselves that way. We like low budgets, or we just don't have access to big budgets. We don't really work with big budgets. I mean, and Godar's pretty honest. He's like, well, I don't work with big budgets, but I can make a hell of a movie, you know? So he goes in there and makes a hell of a movie. You know? Like, that Alphaville is still kind of low budget. You watch it like a movie, and you're like, this is a real deal. I mean, you shoot as these shot across shots, these two shots, these like bar scenes where he's lost in the crowd, and he's always lost in the crowd, and these endless shadows of car scenes all become kind of special effects of this world that's taking the modern, like a car, and making it like the postmodern, like a game of a spaceship kind of going around playing Space Invaders, but not really, you know? There's so many outdoor car shots, it's like it gets the most Hiroshima War kind of list for that. So we've gone for John Legodar, but now we're going back to American Center, and gladly so, because we had to spend some time also thinking about how the philosophy of 67 rooted from France, and it was Derrida, Foucault, all those guys, and surely they had heard of the French New Wave and had seen all those begging and demands from even Le Chinois, which would make sense. That the reason that some tumult was going on at school is because it wasn't even co-ed for women and men to go to the Sorbonne in 1967. In 1967, the philosophy school of the Sorbonne overturned that with Foucault and Derrida and Lacan, and they overturned that, and they shut down Paris on a strike. And that's pretty much when the French New Wave ended, although Celine and Julie Gaubert and Jacques Rivette and some other Louis Malle films and Hélène Monet films went on, but the French New Wave wasn't necessarily cut short. They just stopped too because the government shut down and had to wait until the schools allowing co-ed to go back, which was like 7 months later of being shut down. So there's some confusion about why the New Wave ends where it does. And some of these guys, even Godard, will come back with like a wave of movies, like even Hail Mary in the 80s, around the time this film was made, Blade Runner. And in the 80s, when Hail Mary was made, not many people were ever able to access it from America that weren't in LA or New York, where they could find a copy of Hail Mary. And it's the one about getting hailing a cab, you know. And it's really a taxi movie, but again, it's very sci-fi built up. Like Wings of Desire and City of Angels and all those are like sci-fi fantasy in a weird way, because Wim Wenders kind of takes Wings of Desire and has this low-budget Alphaville kind of thing going on with the Angels this time. They're in black and white. And they're talking, and they're very melodic with the classical music. And I think those kind of films that are melodic with classical music can kind of go slow with
like the Decalogue, for instance, by Christoph. And again, he's a Scandinavian director, so we're safe there. No, don't mean to make fun of these guys, but seriously, we have nothing to fear for teaching a core of cinema, whatever country it comes from. I'm sure I don't like all the countries that the cinema from that country comes from, although usually it's a rule to like the country where the cinema comes from. It's not always my golden rule, so I apologize for that. The Blade Runner, I don't have to apologize for it because it's one of the most amazing films we've ever seen. We had to surround it in controversy before we moved on because this film wasn't even that controversial. In the 80s, people like these kind of films. These RoboCop dream fantasies, these total recalls. This is Ridley Scott. Ridley Scott of Gladiator. We haven't talked much about him in Masterclass other than that he's an expert filmmaker in his own right. That he does usually command a large budget, and rightly so, because every movie he's made has raked in the dough for Hollywood. It's raked in the dough for everyone. He gives lots of money to his friends that are rich and famous, and they give money to him, and he makes these heart-pounding movies that'll be so burst in expression and so burst in formality. And see, the keys to making a movie, is Ridley Scott would explain sometimes in his film books, is that like you lay out a canvas, whether you know the background or not, you lay down a canvas as though you're laying things in different order on the canvas in depth and area and placement of the items on the set, like it's a theater. And now you picture this one moving, and you choose whether to move up, down, which is very seldom because that's further into the ground unless you're at a high angle. And you move right or left. Usually you don't move diagonally and down, although that's what I'm going to try my next film. Usually you don't move diagonal and down, although I've seen the diagonal and down before, and then the camera kind of come at it overhead. Like on Europa by Lars von Trier, where it kind of gets those overhead shots, and the camera does kind of come in diagonal. Whether that he took that as a diagonal shot, supposedly Robert Altman edits diagonally, so you'll have a shot here of a person, a carry-out photo, here of a person, and he'll diagonally cut over here within the same shot. So Ridley Scott's looking more like to at least move the camera once or twice within the shot. His cuts can be quick, but they're very transparent. It's like classical moves. It's like a classical move, a match on action, a match on line, eyesight line, a match on dialogue, moving back and forth. And usually, and Ridley Scott usually made, I think he invented this rule, that when you're in a dialogue with someone, the person that's talking gets kind of, you don't see them at first and they're still talking, and then all of a sudden you see them in the frame, and then you see what they're saying, and then as they're kind of finishing what they're saying, you don't see them in the frame, and then you kind of see them listening to what the other person's saying, and then the reverse shot, reverse shot. So I promise you, subliminally, and I can't explain how all those things work, except some of them have to do with subject-object positioning and all that of the man and the woman, but hypnotically they work to make you forget that they ever happen, that those movements of the camera are completely normal for what we would expect to see in a movie. So you just blurt out that that's the fact that it was technique at all, and that's really not the point of someone not having a great technique, that they convince you it's not there or hide it. But in Ridley Scott's ways, he's giving us the hugest expression, and he's hiding the fact that he's the one telling the story. He's like, this story's too big for me to tell, brother. But we all know he's the one behind it, and he can be like, he's like the Lucifer Rising of special effects. I mean, his special effects start with Alien, and even before Alien, we got all these movies like Ridley Scott did, and then we get to this one, of course, Blade Runner, and he did Gladiator. He did A Good Year. That's one of his not mentioned movies with Russell Crowe. He did Robin Hood with Russell Crowe, but his brother recently passed away during the making of Pharaoh's Gods and Monsters or whatever, and that was Ridley Scott, and it's a good movie. And I really love his movies. Blade Runner is my favorite. It's a dystopia in a post-apocalyptic setting where there's all these robots, and they're humans playing the robots. So humans playing the robots. Okay, so it's Daryl Hannah as a robot, and she's already one of the decked out Kill Bill people in this one, because she's already got to kill Harrison Ford or who else ever, because she's a programmed robot that's going to self-destruct or destroy everything, and that the Blade Runner's the one that has to kill the robots. But isn't he normally defined as a robot too? And if he is, does Harrison Ford ever find out he's a robot in this? And whether he is or not, it's kind of never known. It's never known. It's ambiguous. So if he's a robot in this, then he would have found out that androids dream of electric sheep, which is the Philip K. Dick that models this. And Philip K. Dick was actually starting, more in the late 70s, early 80s, like later in the 80s, with his writing. He had done a few before short stories, but Alphaville was a very Philip K. Dick movie without having been. I mean, you look at Minority Report by Spielberg, it feels very Philip K. Dick, kind of is based on one of his stories. And A Scanner Darkly is based on one of his stories. I've had stories that were like Philip K. Dick. Philip K. Dick's a hard one to write like. It's dystopic. It's post-apocalyptical. It's machine versus man, and machine always wins. It's alien versus man, and alien always wins. It's man never wins versus whoever he's against, but he accepts the circumstances around him, like Kafka, as they're falling apart. And as they corrode and fall apart and society breaks down to one last thing, his heroes of the story think they've won it, and they're trapped in captivity forever by the dystopic, post-apocalyptic, claustrophobic, and slowly dying world, if it hasn't died and they've been left there already. That's kind of the Philip K. Dick scenario that most of his stories follow. So we see that same thing in this movie, like the robot is like vanquishing these women and men that are robots. Rutger Hauer's one, and there's this whole thing about it where it tries to humanize the robots, like they're AI infested, but like this time poetically Shakespeareanized AI method. Because you've got Rutger Hauer's in this role, and he's like, he's about to get killed or to be killed or to kill Harrison Ford, who's been all along assigned the mission of tracing down these Blade Runners. He even checks his computer in to the side. It's like this weird way of finding the width and depth of something in a shot by moving around the way the shot took it. And I've seen cameras that'll shoot way up here that you shoot down here. I've used them too, where you film down here where I'm talking and the camera's way up here. Yeah, it's pretty weird. But in Blade Runner, Harrison Ford's sent in the rain, and he has to go kill these guys that are robots so they don't go on and kill the master of them who created them. And he's not really like a Bill Gates guy. He's more like this misanthropic, like, engineer that lives at the top of this high rise. And to get into the high rise, you have that whole special effect of the rising elevator that takes up a building and travels back and forth, and there's this camera that floats forward and sees LA in 2026 or whatever. It's blowing fire everywhere, and the ship's going in further. So you see like a shot of the ship. This is Ridley Scott, man, special effects. You see the shot of the ship coming this way, and then it flips and you start to see the fire burning in the background. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Fiery rain in the background. And it's like behind the fire is like this big like image board of like a theater projection on a wall, and it's like a big TV like they have on Wall Street, like for the dropping of the ball on New Year's. It's got those big screen TVs, and they already got commercials on them, which bravo, because in the commercial future we're gonna have giant billboards of commercials that move. I mean, that's so obvious. Whether we've got them now already, we probably do, but we're gonna have them. And I think it makes something ring out when there's like a humanizing to him killing Rutger Hauer, because Rutger Hauer kind of like kneels in this position and he's like, lay down all instinct to the void and surround another tomorrow with today's characteristics of yes or no, or filibuster, or how we feel about the void itself. But tonight, tomorrow, we die. It's like, is this all of a sudden a Shakespearean translation of what? And I missed a couple words on there. I don't think characteristic were really in there. That's one of my words. But you have to say, like, if this whole speech is given in there before Harrison Ford can like off him, it's like a reverse Pulp Fiction, because now he's reading the robot Bible to Harrison Ford, who's kind of silent through the whole thing. He doesn't have much to say when he has to kill an alien. I mean, he likes life. He's kind of optimistic about this dystopia. He rides in taxi cabs. Sometimes they hover too, and things hover, and there's aliens everywhere, and he just tries to be who he is. But somehow it doesn't seem like he really enjoys his job of killing alien robots, except that he's already professed that he will continue to do so. Now that he's already professed to continue to do so, I'm not sure why, if it's for the money or if he's a slave to the system. And there's something in the beginning text that it texts out with a computer. It's like the whole thing. It's like in 2079, the world will be a different place. It will be filled with robots, and robots will rule the world. I mean, it's not that, but that's what would have happened if the Blade Runner hadn't killed the robots, so they didn't somehow breed with robots. Robots don't breed, and don't get me started. But we have a whole new level to think that it's this easy job to kill something that's like personalized. Like when he kills Daryl Hannah, I'm not giving spoilers away, but she's like beating him up like a wrestler and almost takes him down and almost kills him. But it's like how hard he gets beaten, it's almost like he's a robot. And then we kind of see those shots of dream sequences of that horse run by on a hill. Very Ridley Scott, to have an intertext of a sequence of like a beautiful piece of nature, a slow-mo horse running across a hill, breathtaking. And in these Ridley Scott movies like Legend is the one where you always have intercuts of everything. Like you have to, it's like the devil will be there, and then you'll have Tom Cruise with a sword, and you'll have like an angel fairy, and then you'll have like a desert, and then you'll have a horse running across. And I'm not making fun of it. It's freaking breathtaking to watch a Ridley Scott movie. Because every shot you're going to be blown the mind. It's better than DeMille, because DeMille can set up these big shots that are towering and cantankerous, that Ridley Scott has got you on the move with the towering shot. It's more like The Intolerance, where you hit them with the, here we're coming down this mountain, and we've got a giant crane with us, and the crane's coming down, and we're going to see everything from the whole shot down to the minute detail. And sometimes there's edits in between, and I don't really mind that either, because you can still totally see that they got it with an in between the edit crane. Like a crane, a cutaway to a horse, and a crane. You know, this is the kind of technique that arrived on the scene from Ridley Scott. But I'm going to spare you all just one more film. One more film that we're going to go through, and we've had a lot of time tonight, but not as much time as I thought I would take. So I'm glad we burned through Alphaville and Blade Runner. And then, you know what? Before we retire Blade Runner, there's a few things I have to say. I was just thinking I finished the Ridley Scott thing. I forgot. Blade Runner also has a categorization of a female that is sort of in charge of a high-rise that falls in love with Harrison Ford. They never find out if he's a robot. Now, this is what I forgot to mention, and then we'll get to this next one. If Harrison Ford's really a robot, why wouldn't he just self-destruct if he was sent to kill robots? I mean, is he a robot built to kill robots? That's kind of confusing, because he is a robot. So he's a robot built to kill robots that aren't him. But why wouldn't all robots gang off on him if there were so many? And why wouldn't they send 3 robot killers if they're made to kill robots? Because then each one of them can literally kill a robot without getting blown up by the other 3. He's outnumbered. But these and other questions are outnumbered by the fact that it is one of the greatest films of all time, because it's so shrouded in mystery that it actually, unbelievably enough, wants you to ask those 3 questions to get thrown off from what it's really about. Now, we could look at it like The Big Sleep, where it's like this Philip Marlowe character is on the search for his like iconography, and here we have a modern, lots of close-ups, lots of full body shots of the action, lots of bus shots of things going by. He's sitting at this Chinese restaurant talking to Edward James Olmos, and they're like having dip say chun or whatever. No, they're having like noodles. And the whole movie's proceeding with things like we've never seen before. And everything's getting bigger and bigger, riding the elevator. We see this strange thing when Edward James Olmos appears, that he leaves these like macrame, these little paper things that are like tied together and made to film like a duck, or maybe folded so it's like a duck. And he's finding these like macrame everywhere, and he doesn't know what it is. So he's like, he boards some ship, talks to the girl. She says it's over. He thinks it's maybe over, not going on. And what's magical about the film is that half the time it's raining when he's on the ground, and half the time when he's in the buildings, it's like you can see the sunset come across. And you just get this sense that Blade Runner and all the Ridley Scott movies censored before it, that one thing I love about Ridley Scott is he's the god of his movie. Speaking of God, and in a lesser god way, Godard is the god of his movie, but in a bigger way, Godard is the god of his movie in not needing that much to do it. But you can't really blame Ridley Scott for wanting, and Steven Spielberg for wanting to use everything they can, because they've already fashioned so much money into the industry that they can take whatever money out because it's their money. The industry paid them for making their money, and now they made money. And people are always talking about, let's follow the money, let's chase the money. So let's talk a little bit about that. Movies are expensive. You can ask Godard, though he had a low budget, did he go broke? Yes. Do filmmakers always go broke on movies? Pretty much. Because are they asked to put all the resources they have at the time into it? Absolutely. And if all the resources go into it, then all the stuff, if it looks like a lot, is that too much? Not really. Because what's too much about using all the resources you've made from your other movies? Isn't that what you're supposed to do with movies? You make one for all the movie money and resources you have, whether from film school or whatever. And then if it makes money, well, then you can pay that film off and hopefully make twice as much and make enough to make another movie, which is going to be a little more expensive than the first, because as time moves on, inflation rises. So just hear me out. These big movies like Ready Player One are huge movies, but they don't lose the creative craft that you think only Godard can get creative craft because he's inexpensive. Well, he's expensive in some ways because they have less people in France. It's not as big of a place, so that he's bankrupting everybody to make a film that no one's going to go see, and only a person like me would be like, Alphaville rocks, because I love it, even though it's kind of Marxist, and we all know we're condemning Marxism and everything, at the same time we're worshiping it just because it's cheaper. Well, in a weird, critical, revolutionary, reactionary way, I'd say let's worship it because it's let's not commercial, but let's also worship it because it's freaking commercial. I mean, if it's a movie, it doesn't have to say wax on, wax off, but if it does, I'm not going to condemn it necessarily, even though there's bad vibes from some commercials with cultural pollution, right? We don't have to get into the ins and outs of cultural pollution, but this, I'm telling you, Spielberg's researched it. Ridley Scott's researched it. They don't want to climb into some role where they're telling people what to do. The mystery of Blade Runner is so mysterious you don't understand why he's sent to kill him. How he succeeds is by chance. And when he's fighting the guy on the top of the building at the end and it's raining. But let's take a lighter note than a Philip K. Dick story and go post-apocalyptic, dystopic Ready Player One. Now this is a lot like the book that was written. Well, the book that was written. Like, I'm having a struggle here. I wrote a book. Hey, let's change the subject because I can't remember who wrote this book, but it's Ready Player One, and it's a lot like this book that I wrote. Is what I was going to say. No, it was what I was going to say. Which was written with this friend, and her name was Sheley Smith, and she's really cool. And we talk on the phone, and that's about it. But I talked to her, and she had wanted to write a sci-fi book with me. And we made it, like the beginning of it at least, ready like Player One, but why they don't have to be mad at us is we changed it up from a guy walking around with a computer, but they're still getting this monitor, like this virtual reality monitor, every once in a while. Well, what's great about Ready Player One that makes it so much better than mine, and so much better than the other like video game movies of the genre, which really, there aren't a lot. There's like about video games. There's like Wizard and Ready Player One, and that's why I was surprisingly going to name one that was like it, but there isn't. You know, it's like, well, it's not like Clockwork Orange just got to keep his eyes open in the thing. But they do see the shining in it. They do run into King Kong, those are points I noted. But the special effects are digitally composed. Even Blade Runner had to be recomposed digitally. But this was taking the George Lucas idea of Attack of the Clones. And we're taking this idea where every scene, like we do with Ridley Scott, where we set up a paintbrush and set up a poster board, and we sit there and paint in them. You know, I was going to say Philip K. Dick just kind of reminds me of that, too. Or like the movie by Catherine Bigelow, Strange Days, where you're always wearing the virtual reality. So continuing on, you set up this whole thing, but this time you can compatibilize it to a digital box. You set these digital boxes up, and then you set these miniature digital boxes up in them, and box within like a grid of like 100 to 50 digital boxes in kind of this wide screen, and then you compose in every box what the image looks like. So in the background, midground, then you get these people that wear motion control, and then they record it and regenerate it on digital printout of what they want that character to look like. The main character in this is human, but he's in the video game form, which is animated throughout this film. That it's animated is because we're seeing the character as he travels from this world of like destroyed trailers that are all falling apart, and he comes out of it and he's wearing this like headgear. And when he's wearing that, he's in a different universe. But he happens to be the champion player of the video game that everyone in the world is playing. And everyone in the world is playing it, even by illegal means in some of the states and venues they live in, and you can't really tell where anybody's really at. But most of them speak English, and they're in like America, really. It's like 2055, it's like 20 years after Blade Runner. Everything's blown up, and we look through this game. And the game is like an ideal world, though it's full of challenges that can knock all your coins out of you. It can knock you down. It can be hard to get back up again. And it sometimes unplugs your game when you get killed. Wouldn't that be a frustrating Xbox game? Or every time you got killed, you got locked out for 12 hours? They used to do that on video games. And hell come bent. We have to deal with that again. So we don't have much more time. We have about 10 minutes left. And I'm going to shorten the class a little bit because we went through a lot tonight. I hope it wasn't too much and too fast, but again, in Ready Player One, so when they get these data grids, these boxes, and they paint the background, paint the foreground, and place the characters with the virtual reality in these 360 movements. They can rotate 360 degrees in 360 degree movements. So you take like a circle and you rotate it this way, and then the other one goes through it the way that's centrifugal to the other one being able to roll, which is always clockwise. Always clockwise. But that's the rotation of the 3D character you've created. If they're on the ground, you can't really rotate under to the ground. You can kind of have a shot from down here and look up. But now you can have a shot that moves back over and looks up the other side. If you really needed 360 rotation, digital animation and digital CGI and special effects made it possible to have 3D rotation within the camera shot, 3D rotation against the character, and 3D rotation with the movement of everything. If I can't name enough the importance of that, that's special effects now. 360 degrees you can move, 360 degrees the camera can move, and 360 degrees of rotation. And the rotation is different in the camera movement because the rotation could be either the character, the movement of the character, or the movement of the background. Held within those confines. I mean, it's simple to explain that the background is devised up before the foreground, but the centrifugal 360s with the character being able to go right or left, up or down in every direction, and the camera can go in every direction, and then it can rotate in every direction. Very distinct, important points you should play with as a camera if you've ever set up a shot. And if you want to set up a golden shot, watch Blade Runner. It'll show you how to set up the golden shots. This one's more complicated because it's digitally added later, but they still use the kind of classical awareness of editing a language in this movie. They still use the scene where he looks out, and wherever he sees is what they point to. He's still seeing point of view of the virtual reality world, even if it does lead him into these, like, the shining shenanigans. And even if it does lead him to getting all the coins, everybody's coins of all, there's a badass scene in this movie where towards the second third of the movie, everybody gets their coins banged out. The game gets unplugged and everybody loses all their coins at once. And you're just seeing character after character. It's like the Jedi apocalypse. It's that devastating. Everybody loses all their freaking coins. And they're dropping them, and they're flying off, and characters are dying. In the real world, they're not dying. Their headgear's a little fried, and they're just blowing up, and it may not work anymore. But in Ready Player One, everybody loses their coins. There's other fascinating things that everybody's playing in the world together, and they want to meet certain people in real life that they've met in the game that they think are really cool, and if there is a whole romance between a guy and a girl, and they're cool in real life, and they're cool in the movie, let's hear it for Spielberg, because these guys are cool in real life, and they're cool in the movie. They're cool either way. He's cool playing the video game there, or meeting her in real life. He can kick ass either way, and he's a young kid. So now that he's a young kid kicking ass, we're like, well, that's more optimistic because at least he invents this way to find the maker of the video game and tell him to chill out and that we need to have a way to end this. And even though he's inventing a race of perfect eugenic people, he needs to just know that the video game's going to go too far and it'll be all that's left because people will lose their coins and go mad and kill everyone. And don't believe me, do you, that that's in this movie and you saw it too? That's what I was thinking. So when they had the special effects look this way, the ending does have like the painted backgrounds with the majestic game maker. He's the same guy from BFG and Bridge of Spies. And those are recent Spielberg movies. Spielberg's at his best here. I don't think he's made a movie after this. It was 2019. He did do a West Side Story type thing for the TV network. And we could go back to Sugarland Express or Duel or Amblin, his student film. We could go all over the place with what we think about Spielberg and how he's contributed to a generation of filmmakers. And as he's among the greats, if not the greatest, of that generation of filmmaker. His film Jaws is still so huge and destructive and wild and apocalyptic and abnormal and crunchy and dousey and completely condemnatory of man even being able to stay alive or survive in even not even the biggest wild of area that nature's going to devour man. And it even exaggerates that and even gets away with it and says, you know what, you come to see this film, you're leaving with a big shark bite on your leg. And then he puts that on your mind and you keep thinking you got bit by a shark when you go see the movie, because they used to sell them with shark bites, just like they used to sell moving ET dolls. And those moving ET dolls, I've got to explain to you a little bit. When we were kids, we were told, buy like a commercial that Steven Spielberg was on this shit. He said, those are God, treat them as God, ET dolls are God, and if I find them in a science experiment, I'm going to be very nervous about this, kiddies. Because Steven Spielberg used to have a kid's show, nobody knows that. Now, E.T. would go in these round circles of prayer. And we'd pray to E.T., and then I'd have to pray to E.T., and then when we prayed to E.T., he would actually come out, and me and my cousins would be sitting there. E.T. would talk to me. I don't know if somebody was dubbing over a speech or if they had a tape recorder, but E.T. can talk. And I only say that as a lighter note because the Spielberg ploy in all of us is to have a lighter edge of it. Although War of the Worlds and Minority Report look pretty bleak, there's still kind of a happy ending in those. Kind of. I'm not saying it's the happiest ending where he still wakes up, he's in a dystopic post-apocalyptic, but he stopped the video game from taking over everybody's lives in the world so that they could play the video game again, this time by knowing that they won't ruin their lives, and the game maker's not going to stop them on this limbo. He's not going to uninvent them. He's not going to create his own race. I've seen those other types of plots where they're trying to create a race like maybe Event Horizon or something. Those Matrix type movies later, Jupiter Ascending, where they've got the whole plot with the game maker, you know? And I'm like, well, Ready Player One gets me for most over the top, in a good way, special effects. Most wildly cool, like, kid actor, wildly cool chick actor. Totally did it not for the love affair of it, but for the absolute fun of having a romantic interest in one of these already, like, traditionally, like, we're looking back on history to the nostalgia of what things would have been like if we had romance even in the King Kong era, or even in the Shining era, or even when cinema wasn't about to go over the top and spend everything and put everything into their most, and then kind of disappeared because of some of the things that happened with COVID and the writer's strike and all these things. But movies are coming back and they're sort of simmering back out, and people are making these movies. And I made a movie called Dark Lord. It's really intense, dude. You got to see it. But that's not what I'm here to sell. Those movies. I'm not here to sell movies. I'm just saying These movies I am here to sell. If I talked about them in class, you should buy them. It won't affect your grade, but it will affect the way you watch movies. So it will affect your grade because then you'll see it. And if you see a movie enough, you'll understand how to write about it. In this, we're kind of focusing on special effects. So the 3 drills to remember is like that this is the digital circle of where the object, like the person, can rotate in 360 degrees in 360 directions, and the camera can too, movement or up and down, or the or the diagonal shot. And the up and down in those other shots, unlike the 360, come from Blade Runner. But Blade Runner sets it up with low light and like a detective film, low light and film noir, so that there does look like there's depth to the framing because of the shadows in the chiaroscuro lighting. And we definitely see the chiaroscuro lighting in Alphaville, where it's one light. Ready Player One defines its foreground, background, side light, and pitch light as it does so with computer-generated monitors. That sometimes this process is harder, more expensive. Spielberg's got a bigger purse. He's made so much money off of Jaws. He can do what he wants forever. I just looked it up in the accounting history. Jaws is still making money. And so I don't think he's going to quit spending lots of money on the movies. Is it wrong to? Is it the Holy Grail syndrome? Are we spending this money on the movies just so they'll be good? Well, why wouldn't you do something just so it's good? But no, that's not the reason. They have an expression to make of a film culture, of art, of the worth of film, that shows that the worth of film is because we're worthy too in the audience, but the film is worth about 10 million more than all of us combined. But we all have to gather up to prove, not just to prove the worth, but the worth is already there, because not just audience seeing it, but to make the art of film making, where you make something move, is already worth our money. So why not deck it out with all the extras of all the bells and whistles of being to spin it around like a top, throw it around in anti-gravitational, and send it backwards with like several jump cuts in between. That's all I'm asking, is what's the difference? So I know that there's some really great films that have no special effects, but in a strange way, you look at a movie like Occurrence at Owl Creek, I could see how that movie is in slow-mo at times, is like jump cuts at times, flashbacks at times, pans, trick pans, yeah. And yeah, in a lot of Spielberg films, we do get the classical editing and the trick pans and the quick shots. But he'll do some big cranes backward, he'll do some backward and forward. There ain't a shot Spielberg hadn't done. That may not be true about the rest of them. But when Spielberg was making Close Encounters of the Third Kind, for instance, he would wake up, every night he'd come off from the set, he'd watch a movie, full-length Hollywood movie, kind of like having a sorted AFI list or something. He'd watch a Hollywood movie, write down his favorite scene, and go make that for the shot of however his script went for Close Encounters, make it for the shot. But you have great special effects in Close Encounters, because when that truck is made to look like it's really spinning over, they really had a crane that was spinning it over, but he was strapped in, so it didn't look like he was falling out. Well, now that I've scared you, impaired you, dared you, I know there's more to be talked about with the filmmakers I brought up: Godard, Ridley Scott, Steven Spielberg. Steven Spielberg being one of the all-time great directors. He's a great man. He's well respected. He's head of the Producers Guild. He's made 1,399 produced as a movie film. Got more credentials than anybody as a producer. And on top of that, his own films always challenge the medium and challenge the norm. What I like the challenge in Ready Player One is we could really get slung and stuck in this world of the future forever, where we're either always in a video game, which is kind of what they desired in the film, strangely enough, or that we're never in the video game and the world around us is gone and we wish we had the video game.